You know, if you've ever taken a peek at the bookshelves of top geopolitical strategists, military academy instructors, or honestly, even modern tech CEOs, you've probably seen this one incredibly imposing, dense book staring back at you, Carl von Clausewitz's On War. Today, we're taking this monumental and, yes, slightly intimidating treatise and we're totally demystifying it. And I promise you, this is absolutely not going to be some dry academic lecture about 19th century troop movements. Instead, we're going to unpack a brilliant, timeless framework for understanding human conflict, competition, and strategy. And as you'll see, it applies just as much to your everyday life as it does to the battlefield.
So, it's a great question, right? What could a Prussian soldier from the 1800s possibly teach a modern startup founder? The biggest misconception about On War is that people pick it up expecting this step-by-step military manual. They kind of think it's a guide to playing chess, like put your cannons here or flank the cavalry this way. But Clausewitz hit the nail on the head with this profound realization. War is literally nothing like chess. I mean, in chess, the board doesn't suddenly turn into ankle-deep mud, and your knight doesn't misunderstand your orders. War is this wildly dynamic, chaotic collision of living, thinking human wills. And because of that, his work gives us the ultimate mental models for navigating uncertainty, whether that's in modern business, leadership, or just life in general.
Section 1. The Philosopher of War, Surviving the Napoleonic Nightmare. To really get Clausewitz's genius, we have to understand the massive, violent paradigm shift he lived through. Before his time, European warfare was, well, it was actually pretty polite. It was rigid and it was limited. Kings hired professional mercenaries. They marched in these neat, colorful little lines, and they usually just packed it up and stopped fighting when winter hit or the money ran out. The common people barely even noticed it happening. But then, the French Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte completely shattered that old world.
Napoleon introduced the draft and mobilized the entire French nation. Suddenly, it was hundreds of thousands of passionate citizens fighting for ideology and national pride. You can see this terrifying new reality reflected right here in Clausewitz's own life timeline. Born in Prussia in 1780, he entered the military at 12. By 1806, he watched his highly traditional army get absolutely dismantled by Napoleon's rapid new style of war at Jena. He was even taken prisoner. Later, in 1812, he fought in the freezing, brutal Russian campaign and witnessed the total collapse of military genius firsthand. He lived through the extreme highs and devastating lows. Tragically, he died of cholera at just 51, leaving his manuscript unfinished. Actually, it was his brilliant wife, Marie von Brühl, who took his scattered, chaotic papers, organized the whole shebang, and published them. Without her, we literally wouldn't even have this masterpiece today.
Section 2. Politics and the Trinity, the Foundational Philosophy. Now, moving into the core of his thought, we need to completely separate ourselves from the physical, tactical placement of troops or weapons. Clausewitz demands that we zoom way out to look at the overarching philosophy driving the conflict.
And that brings us here. War is the continuation of politics by other means. If there is literally only one sentence you know from this entire book, it's got to be this one. Yet, it's arguably one of the most widely misunderstood quotes in modern history. Clausewitz is establishing here that war doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It's never this independent, self-contained event. Violence isn't the ultimate purpose of war. It's merely a tool. War, he argues, is basically just a conversation being carried out with weapons instead of words. In the original German, the word he uses is Politik, which neatly encompasses both politics and policy, the overarching outcome you're trying to achieve. Think of it like this: the military is just a scalpel, and policy is the surgeon. You don't let the scalpel decide what surgery to perform, right? History is just full of disasters where leaders totally forgot this. Look at the United States in the Vietnam War or the war in Afghanistan. In both cases, overwhelming military firepower won almost every major tactical engagement on the ground. But winning those tactical battles is completely useless if they don't produce a lasting, desired political reality. The political goal always has to be the master.
To explain this a bit further, Clausewitz uses a really fascinating thought experiment to heavily contrast pure theory with messy reality. He imagines absolute war. In pure theory, if two sides clash, there's no logical limit to the violence. You escalate, your enemy escalates even further, and it creates this endless mathematical spiral of extreme violence that results in total annihilation. But, as we know, that never actually happens in the physical world. Instead, we get real war, which is always modified, restrained, and bogged down by human imperfections.
So you might be wondering, what keeps every conflict from turning into apocalyptic destruction? Well, Clausewitz points out 4 breaks that keep real war in check. First, it's never an isolated act. There's always historical context and preparation involved. Second, it takes time. Humans get tired, supplies run out. That gives sides a minute to reconsider. Third, defeat is rarely truly final. A nation might just rebuild and challenge the outcome decades later. And finally, the absolute biggest break of all, politics. The actual value of your political goal dictates the limit on the military effort and the national wealth you're willing to spend. You're simply not going to sacrifice your entire nation over a minor border dispute.
And this leads us right into one of his most brilliant frameworks ever, the paradoxical trinity. Clausewitz says every conflict is governed by three forces, kind of suspended like a pendulum swinging between three powerful magnets. Step 1, you have passion and emotion. That's the primordial violence and hatred of the people. Step 2, chance and probability, the realm of risk, courage, and chaos, which is managed by the military. And Step 3, pure reason, the cold, calculated policy of the government. Here is his big warning. If any single pillar of this trinity breaks down, the whole effort collapses. You could have a highly skilled army and a totally rational government, but if the people feel no passion and protest the war, you fail. It's a completely interconnected ecosystem.
Section 3. Surviving the fog of war. The human element. Okay, let's leave the pristine planning map room for a second and step out into the terrifying reality of combat, because the pace of execution is entirely different from the pace of planning. This is where the unyielding chaos of the human element takes over.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this concept of friction, or Reibung. On a map, everything looks so incredibly easy. You just draw a straight arrow from city A to city B, boom, done. But in reality, the bridge is washed out, the courier gets totally lost, the food wagons are stuck in the mud, and the commander is terrified. Clausewitz uses this incredibly powerful metaphor of moving through waist-deep water. In normal life, you just walk through the air without even thinking about it. But in war, every single step requires immense physical and mental effort just to overcome the environment itself.
Add to all that friction the famous fog of war, the terrifying reality that like 3/4 of your information is false, outdated, or just wildly exaggerated. So how do you even survive that? Clausewitz introduces the military genius. And actually, scratch that. He doesn't mean a math whiz. He means someone with a very specific emotional and psychological balance. They possess kudoil, which translates to the glance of the eye. It's this highly developed intuition to just glance at the chaos and instantly see the truth. But intuition is totally useless without the second trait, resolution. That's the stubborn mental courage to stick to your decision despite overwhelming fear and conflicting advice. The true genius perfectly harmonizes sharp perception with unshakable courage.
Section 4. The mechanics of strategy, finding leverage and limits. All right, now that we understand the chaos of execution, let's slow down a bit and dive into the cold, calculated frameworks of military mechanics. How do you actually find leverage out there?
This brings us to perhaps his most influential strategic concept ever, the center of gravity. Look, you cannot attack everything at once. If you try, you're just weak everywhere. You have to find the hub of all power and direct all your energy right there. But the trick is, the center of gravity changes depending on the conflict. It could be an enemy's main army, their capital city, or, like an insurgency, the ideological will of the population. When Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, he disastrously thought the center of gravity was the physical city of Moscow. He took the city, but he hit the completely wrong target. The true center of gravity was the Tsar's political will to keep fighting. So Moscow burned, and Napoleon's army literally starved in the snow.
Here, Clausewitz drops a deeply counterintuitive bombshell on us. Defense is actually the inherently stronger form of warfare. We usually assume the attacker is stronger, right? Because they have all the momentum. But the defender gets to fight on familiar ground with secure supply lines, while the attacker completely exhausts themselves paying a heavy price for every single step forward. But he makes sure to clarify, a proper defense is not just being a passive punching bag. No way. It's a shield made of well-directed blows. You let the attacker exhaust themselves against your strong positions, and then, at the absolute perfect moment of their overextension, you unleash a devastating counterattack.
And that exact moment of overextension actually has a name, the culminating point of victory. As an attacker advances, all these hidden costs start to accumulate. Supply lines stretch thin, troops have to be left behind to guard towns, casualties mount up. Eventually they hit this invisible threshold where their strength peaks relative to the defender. Pushing forward beyond this line makes them dangerously vulnerable. It is such a profound lesson in restraint. I mean, history is literally a tragic graveyard of empires that were blinded by arrogance and pushed past this point of no return. Think about Nazi Germany stretching thousands of miles to Stalingrad only to be trapped and utterly destroyed, or Napoleon pushing all the way to Moscow.
To make all this work, we have to clearly separate these two terms, strategy versus tactics. Tactics is how you use armed forces to win the specific combat engagement right in front of you. Strategy is how you use that combat to achieve the ultimate political objective of the whole war. Clausewitz is incredibly blunt about this. Tactics absolutely must serve strategy, and strategy must serve policy. A tactical victory on some random hill that doesn't serve a larger political goal, he basically calls that organized murder. Furthermore, he totally shatters that old 18th century dream of a bloodless maneuver. Deception and maneuvering only work because they are backed up by the credible threat of real, violent destruction. War is definitely not a game.
Section 5, Beyond the Battlefield, Clausewitz in the Modern World. Let's move to the final piece and see how this builds. Because you might be asking yourself, why are we still reading this today? Well, while weapons change and artificial intelligence evolves, human nature remains exactly the same. These 19th century frameworks absolutely govern our lives and our businesses today.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can map these historical concepts directly to the modern world. Think about it. Friction isn't just mud on a battlefield anymore. It's supply chain delays, software bugs, and the brutal reality of trying to hire for a startup. Success isn't having a perfect whiteboard plan, it's building a team resilient enough to handle that daily friction. And what about the center of gravity? That is absolutely essential for corporate strategy. Are you wasting millions attacking a competitor's brand loyalty when their real center of gravity is actually their low-cost supply chain? If so, you're pouring money down the drain. And on a geopolitical level, when modern nations fail in counterinsurgency or cyber warfare, it's almost always because they obsessed over tactical metrics and completely ignored the Trinity. Specifically, the ideological passion of the people.
Which brings us right back to you. Every single day you operate in the fog of life. You are never going to have perfect information before making a career change or a big investment. You need that kudo, that informed intuition paired with resolute determination to just go for it. But most importantly, I want you to really look at this question on the screen. What is your overarching political objective in life? Are you getting so caught up in the friction and the tactical grind of your daily tasks that you've forgotten your real purpose? If your daily battles at work are destroying your health or your relationships, you are winning meaningless tactical skirmishes while losing the overall campaign of your life. Keep your core life purpose as the master.
Please like and subscribe.